Hello friends, welcome to the second week. This is the non-programming lecture, so let's get right on into these three words that kind of go together. So here are my goals for you, and let's get right on into it with arguments and assumptions, because we will be talking a lot about issues in this class of various types, and it's important to know why an argument about a certain issue resonates strongly with us, or maybe we don't agree with it and we want to talk about why, or maybe we were wrong to agree with it, and again we should talk about what it means to make a good argument. Okay, so if somebody's telling me something, how can I be sure that it's a good idea, that what they're saying is a good argument? And that is kind of the topic for this first little part of the lecture. And we'll give many different ways to critically assess arguments later in the class. So this will just be something we'll add to as the semester goes on. So something that's pretty obvious, but we should write it down, is if somebody's telling you something, they're arguing their point to you, and you disagree, you can't just tell them, no, you're wrong, sorry. You can't say, like, I don't like you, I hate you, and that's why you're wrong. That's actually a fallacy, and we'll talk about that later in the class. But, yeah, you have to at least give a counter-argument. You have to say, okay, you're wrong because this makes no sense. And one thing that can make no sense about an argument is the assumptions that it makes. So, let's talk about assumptions. And there's way too much on this slide, so I'm going to pretend it's like a little overhead and show you just as much as I want to show you. Alright, so assumptions is another thing that is probably, you have a definition in your head and it's probably the right one already, but let's just make it concrete. So an assumption is something that you take for granted when you're talking about things, or you're arguing things in our case. So for example, it's almost my birthday, maybe I go out and buy some birthday candles and I want to use them. So the manufacturer of those birthday candles is going to be like, yeah, this birthday candles are meant to be lit in the air. Surely he's not going to take these candles into a pool underwater, use some kind of underwater blowtorch to try and light the thing. That just won't work. And so it would make no sense for me to go and sue the birthday candle manufacturer, because obviously my assumptions were wrong trying to use this underwater. Okay? So that's a silly assumption. Let's have some more silly. Well, this is a normal one, and then another silly one. Alright, so for example, I make a dinner reservation at a restaurant. Gosh, I can't wait to do that again. And then the restaurant is going to assume, right, that I will show up on time. I kind of promise to do that, and I will give them money, and they will give me food. That is the transaction. So that is another assumption. And then finally, a silly one. For example, let me go on the street and hold up a sign saying that I do not like parakeets and I don't want them to run for office in the United States. Or I don't say that I don't like them, I just say that I don't want them to run for office. Like, birds are fake, I had this sign with that picture. Something like that. So if you're an onlooker watching me, perhaps you will assume that I am insane, or I just got burned once by a parakeet, or, if you do not doubt my sanity, one reasonable assumption that you might make is maybe there's a law somewhere that is like old and should be changed that doesn't disallow non-humans to run for office. Otherwise, why would this dude be out on the corner? Okay, so a few different examples of assumptions, and so now it's your turn. Let's see if we can figure out the assumption that's in this example. So go ahead and read this. Senator Franklin, a member of the Orange Party, and I got this from the internet, and apparently Senator Franklin is a dude, and so the Orange Party, which he belongs to, supports this increased military spending by the federal government, and then the next sentence says, Franklin will surely vote for a cut in spending on social programs. So you see that in between these two sentences, there was a jump that got made. How did we get between them? Maybe I should separate them a little bit and do something like this. We can call this sentence number 1. Come on. We can make enough space. Yeah, we can. Alright, so here's what I can do. This is like sentence 1, sentence 2, and then we can ask, all right, now this argument, it is an argument. It's making a case for something. What does it assume? And assume, no pun intended, that all of these options are the only possible options. Okay? So there's nothing else that could happen. Only A through E is possible. Okay, so with that in mind, go ahead and pause the video maybe, and see if you can figure out which assumption this argument is using. Alright, assuming you're back now, and you thought hard about it, let's talk about the first option, option A. So elected officials always support policies endorsed by their parties. Okay, where does that get us, if we assume that? Alright, Senator Franklin, member of the Orange Party, which supports increased military spending. Okay, if we assume A, well, that means that Senator Franklin will totally support increased military spending by the federal government. That says nothing, though, about why Senator Franklin would want to cut social programs. That has nothing to do with military spending, and we don't know if this is also something that the Orange Party supports. Okay, do you see that there's a missing link? So A cannot be the answer. Alright, let's go the other end. Let's try E. Senator Franklin opposed federal spending on social programs. That would actually support option 2. That would make sense that Franklin would want to surely vote for a cut in spending on social programs, but it no longer makes sense why the first sentence was at all included then. It says nothing about the fact that it says nothing about the Orange Party. It says nothing about military spending. So again, it doesn't link those two ideas. Okay, so we're looking for some kind of link from here to here. And we didn't find it in A. A is actually quite general, and it's probably a very bad idea to assume this, right? This probably is not ever true. Because not every elected official always supports the policies endorsed by their party. Okay, you can think about some recent ideas about that as well. And then this one doesn't connect the two arguments. No connection. And I guess A also doesn't connect things, but we talked about it. Alright, how about D? The Orange Party has the majority in the Senate. Well, that probably means that they're going to get their way, but again, the Orange Party, we know from these two sentences, only cares about military spending. The second sentence, again, makes no sense. There's no connection. No connection, no connection, no connection. And I hope you're kind of seeing how to pick apart an argument now. It's kind of intuitive, and I want to get you on that level, where it becomes intuitive, at least. Okay, Senator Franklin agrees with the policies of his party. Sure, well, if Senator Franklin, member of the Orange Party, agrees with his party, he's going to support, again, military spending, and we have no clue again about social programs. Sorry I'm spelling it out like this, maybe you're just yelling at me to move on, but it's important to go through this. So again, there's still no connection. This is like A, but weaker, less general. You see that? It's like every elected official supports their party. Senator Franklin only supports their party. So that is, like A, again, no connection. And so the way that I went about this, I left B as the only option, but why? Why is B the right answer? Well, it links the two arguments. It actually performs some kind of link. Links the two sentences. And there might be another reason. This is why I said it. These are the only possible options. So if Senator Franklin believes that the only way to increase military spending is to cut spending on social programs, you gotta take the money from somewhere, I guess, and that's their place of choice, we finally found that link between military spending and social programs, okay? And that is what we needed to go from 1 to 2. And I hope you see that, okay? I spent some time there, and I hope it makes sense. So, with that, now you know how to think about assumptions a little bit more than you did. Okay, now let's get into ethics. This is fun. So, like we said last time, if there's no right answer to anything, then how in the world can we solve these issues? Like, how can we think about them? And maybe there is no way. Maybe there is no way to resolve an issue, but there are ways to approach them. So I'm going to give you some tools that people use, some widely accepted ideas and ways of thinking about problems. So that's what I'll do in this section. Some viewpoints, some standard viewpoints that help people, I guess, not argue, but consider whether something is good or not. All right? Whether you should do something or not, whether it's ethical. Something like that. All right. And then I should talk about, because I'm going to give you another essay, and I want to just hit hard at the start of this class about this. I'm going to give you a bunch of assignments, a bunch of writing assignments, and there is no right answer, okay? I might tell you what to argue, and I will in this essay, in this next essay, but for the most part, I won't care about what you believe, okay? I want you to argue your point well, whatever it is, and of course we'll learn more over the semester about what well means, but I just want to make it clear that my opinions don't matter at all in this class. You can argue the opposite of what I believe, and I will give you full credit if you do a good job. Okay? So just keep that in mind. I'm not... some classes, some writing classes, make it so that you have to think like the professor, and I am not in that group. Okay? You don't have to think like me. I'm not going to train you to think like me. I'm going to train you to think critically, and just think in general, I guess. And I will try to be impartial on all the topics that we talk about. Some of them, maybe my viewpoints will leak through, and I'm sorry about that. But that's what I'll try to do. Okay? Again, you don't have to be like me. I'm not training you to be me. Okay, so let's talk about ethics. It's the study of doing the right thing. So there are a few standard ways of looking at ethical issues, and the first we'll talk about is deontological theories, which is a word that I have not really said out loud very often. So deontological theories stem from this word duty. You can kind of see it in the word, like comes from like Spanish deber, French devoir. So duty, what you ought to do. So a deontological theory is saying, it's giving you some hard rules, and it's saying that no matter what, these rules that we give you through this theory are absolute, and you have to always follow them. Okay? That's a deontological theory. We'll talk about one, very famous one. Then there's utilitarianism, which maybe if you took economics, you know this term, and it considers the utility of the actions or the issue. So how much good can it produce if you do this thing? How much happiness can it produce? That is utility in this case. And then there's a thing called natural rights, which you might be tired of from U.S. history, and we won't really touch on this in this class. You might read about it in the book if you choose to get the book. It's like Thomas Hobbes and Locke as well, saying things like we have these rights by being born. They were given to us, and maybe we made some kind of social contract with our government, things like that. But we will focus on in this class these first two, because they're helpful for looking at a problem. So Kantianism, invented by Immanuel Kant back in the day, and what he believed is that you should always act in a way that you would want everyone else to act. So it's like do unto others, okay? And you get no special exceptions or exemptions for just yourself. You can't be a hypocrite, I guess is the idea. And you should never also treat humans as just a means to an end. And so Kant, for example, would very strongly disagree with something like slavery, which was alive and well in his time. And there's a problem. There's a problem with these viewpoints that I'm going to talk about. So they're not, like, they don't tell you the full truth. And you should use a combination is the idea. Not take any of these viewpoints at face value. Always think of them all and maybe use a combination in your arguments. They might help you make an argument. They're all equally valid. And they can also be combined. Okay, something like that. And let me make some more space for that. Hello. All right. So, problem with Kantianism is there are no exceptions. And that might be a deal breaker for you. But it does help. And so the standard example of Kantianism, and maybe something wrong with it, is lying. So if you go back to the previous slide and you think about what Kant is believing, would he ever support someone lying? And the answer is definitely no. So Kant would be opposed to lying, because he would ask the question, should I ever lie? Should I always lie? Is it okay to always do that? Should everyone always lie? That's the idea. Should everyone always do this thing? And the answer is totally no. Hands down. Absolutely not. And so, I think some of you, like maybe you have children or younger siblings, you lie every Christmas, for example. And you consider that to be a nice thing, and it's helpful and useful and fun and beautiful, or things like that. Okay? So lying, probably in your mind, is not always an issue. But Kant would say, no, you should never lie. And a standard example, one that I saw on YouTube a few times, is this. So here, let me draw a house. And pretend this is my house. And either I'm living, this is my parents' house maybe, I'm living with them right now, or like it's my housemate. But there's somebody who comes to the door, and I don't answer. It's like one of my housemates or my mom answers the door. I don't know how to draw an open door, apparently. But there's the door. It kind of swung open from the inside, maybe. ... And my friend, somebody answered the door, and I'm sitting here in the house. And my friend asked this person, well, hi, what's up? What do you want? And this person says, I'm here to kill Lawton. Where is he? And so, this is, in Kant's world, this person must never lie. And so they would tell my killer, oh, he's in his room. And the idea is that is exactly what you should be doing. And you might not like that idea a whole lot. But one counter-argument to not liking that idea is the following. Pretend that this person did lie and say, he's outside. And then they plan on telling me, all right, there's this dude, go run out the front door or go run out the backyard door, or something like that. They plan on telling me, after this person goes to look for me outside in the backyard, to go escape through the front door, okay? And then the idea is, well, maybe I was a little bit closer to the door and I overheard this person, okay? And I was already outside in the backyard at that time. Do you see the problem now? Now, is my housemate at fault? Should he or she be blamed for my death now because they lied and they were actually correct? Oh man, is this fun to think about. So, currently in my room. So that's one argument in favor of never lying. You might accidentally be correct and cause my death accidentally. Okay, so that's a fun one. Kantianism, just remember, do you always want other people to do this thing? Okay, utilitarianism is the other main topic the other main viewpoint that we'll use in this class. So it focuses on the consequences of actions, and that might be a bit better for the previous example, let's say, popularized by somebody who came before this dude, who I don't remember his name, and John Stuart Mill. So I will say Millsianism, I guess, something like that. And so the idea is, think about what's going on. Think about how much happiness it produces. So like telling your younger siblings or your children that Santa is real, I think increases happiness for everyone, right? That is a pretty common argument, and that would be a utilitarian argument. And so the idea is try to produce the greatest good for the greatest number, okay? And there are issues again. It's hard to determine these consequences. It's hard to consider every single thing that could ever possibly happen. And then also, individuals don't get their own rights. So on the next slide, you'll see that. So it doesn't matter as long as something's good for more people, a smaller group of people might have their rights taken away, okay? And that's something that Kantianism might solve, or like a social contract might solve. And I encourage you to look into these things. This is like, this is kind of half of a philosophy class. It really is. That's what ethics is. Okay, for example, killing one person to save 50. And if you start regurgitating what I'm about to say right now in your check-in, in your little mini essay, I will mark you down, because these are my ideas. You can use these as a jumping off point if you didn't submit your mini essay already. But let's talk about this from a utilitarian point of view. Okay? So killing one person to save 50, a utilitarian would be like, okay, what's the best thing? What produces the greatest good? Okay? And most likely, their conclusion will be, all right, 50 people, 50 is greater than 1, let's save the 50. So they will go and kill one person and not think twice. So that is the utilitarian point of view. And that's why it's important to think about different viewpoints. They will give you a bigger picture, and that's the idea. Okay? So utilitarian will be all about saving those 50 people, even if it means they're going to kill one person. But this does not have to be the only argument. Okay? There are other options. And if you're ever writing an essay, you should consider all of them. Or, alternatively, and this is why it's hard to use utilitarianism and Kantianism. I mean, these aren't easy topics. That's one way of thinking about the consequences. All right, 50 people, it's just better, more people. Let's save those people. They'll be happier for the rest of their lives. Or alternatively, what if that one person was really important? I don't know. Was on the verge of curing cancer. In that case, you could go from that idea to saving, increasing the utility, the happiness of billions of people. And maybe you didn't know. You weren't about to ask the person, you just had a gun in your hand and you had to choose. It's hard to determine these consequences, okay? But it's important to use these frameworks, these utilitarian frameworks, this Kantianism, to approach an argument. Because it might help you come up with a good way to say what you believe, okay? And yeah, so you don't immediately know whether it was better to kill the 50 people, or save the 50 people, or kill the one. But most likely, I mean, if you're going to play the probability game, maybe the 50 was always better. It's very unlikely that somebody is going to cure cancer anytime soon, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's the idea. Hopefully you see how to use both Kantianism now and utilitarianism, Kant and Mill, their ideas to approach a problem because that's all I really care about. These are ways to approach a problem and assess its ethicality. Is that a word? Its validity. Assess how good it is. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, let's check the time. Okie dokie. Yeah, I think we got time. So let's talk about the ethics of Pokemon. And depending on whether you've played like Pokemon Go or one of the games, you might have to do a little research, but the idea is there's this world, there are little tiny monsters that you can domesticate, and they also live in the wild. They have these special powers, and people harness those to do good things, bad things, or like use them to further their interests and become the Pokemon master. Okay, so the ethics of Pokemon. Kant would ask these kinds of questions. So, all right, should we always be of the opinion that we should domesticate wild Pokemon? Okay, and this might be you can apply this to the real world. Like, should we be taking animals out of their natural habitat, putting them in zoos, things like that? So this is before we get to like topics about computer science. These things can really be applied to anywhere, and that's why this is kind of philosophical. It is philosophical. That ethics is a branch of philosophy. All right, so should we always domesticate wild Pokemon is our first question, and the answer is, well, it depends. Okay, is that a good idea? Will they have a better life if they're all domesticated? And so notice that I just combined Kantianism, the first question, with a utilitarian question in the second bullet. So you can do this kind of combination, and it's totally allowed. So will they have a better life if they're all domesticated, all these Pokemon? And the answer is, well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we can... animals in our world live longer in captivity. Many cases. So that's one thing you could take into consideration. But will they be as happy? They won't have as many friends. They won't get to roam as far. So now it's up to you. Are you going to argue this, or are you going to argue that? And that is the point of this class. There is no right answer, but you can use these frameworks to ask the right questions. Okay? And maybe you believe something over another thing, and then it's your job to construct an argument that like supports this one and tries to argue against that one. Okay? And well, another thing in the Pokemon world is leveling up Pokemon. So oftentimes a trainer, somebody who owns a Pokemon, can get them to a higher level than they would be at on their own. And is that helpful? Is that like furthering the Pokemon's interest to be leveled up? That's a question. Maybe they want to like make themselves better, self-improvement at the Pokemon level. And then you might ask, well, is leveling up a Pokemon a good thing? Well, that's a utilitarian question. I hope you see how you can pick those out now. And the answer could be yes or no again. I mean, in order to level up a Pokemon, you have to make them fight. Is it a good thing to make a Pokemon fight another? And, well, the answer again could be yes or no. If you support the idea of leveling up a Pokemon, maybe that's helpful, but that is actually a circular argument, and we'll talk about why that's a fallacy later. But is it a good thing to make a Pokemon fight another? It might be helpful for them in the long run. Like they'll get better at it, but is that a good thing? Like maybe they'll fend for themselves better in the wild, things like that. And yeah, things like that. So should we always use Pokemon to further our dream of catching them all? This is a Kantian kind of argument, and Kant would say no, absolutely not. We're using them as means to an end. And maybe, as a utilitarian, you might be in disagreement. You might say, all right, it is a better idea because maybe leveling up a Pokemon is a good thing, and you can explain why. And as part of furthering our dream, we get to level up our Pokemon, make them better, make them more powerful, and things like that. And then I think both Kant and Mill would agree that we should get rid of the, the terrorists, in a sense, of the Pokemon world called Team Rocket. Kant would be like, yes, these people are bad, maybe, and we should work to get rid of them. Should we always try and prevent things that are harmful? Is the real question. And I think Kant would say yes to that. But obviously, there's no one right answer, and maybe you can think of a Kantian viewpoint that would disagree with this. And that's why this course is pretty fun. There really is no right answer. I just want you to argue your point well and come up with it. And then Mill would be like, what's the utility of this? And probably people's livelihoods would be protected a bit better. I think Mill would also say yes. So here's a case where they agree. So I encourage you to think about these concepts. Maybe pick your own favorite thing. Oh shoot, we only talked about Kant right now. Kant and Mill, because it kind of has to be combined. Okay. Sorry about that. You probably were yelling at me. That's what I should have said up there. So you can come at this from many different points of view. And now let's talk about another Millsian argument. So what do we gain from owning a Pokemon? What do they lose? So again, maybe they're less free. And that decreases utility. That's a problem. Maybe, let's see here. They let us rise up in the world. In status. And so, again, Kant would hate this idea because it's using something to further our own interests, but a utilitarian would not be opposed. So they allow us to rise up in status, which might be good for both of us. Me and the Pokemon that I'm using to battle, right? Because maybe they will be treated better. There was an anime called Pokemon. I don't know if it's still going, but they had these little resorts, and I'm sure as a popular trainer, you get to go to those a bit more often, things like that. And so, again, Kant is always asking, always, should you always do this thing? Is it in everybody's best interest? We're not using somebody. So always think always when you see Kant. And when you see Mill, always think, is this the best thing for the best people? Always think utility. All right. And so that brings us now to, if I check the time just briefly, that brings us now to our first major idea that is computer science related. So piracy and intellectual property. Okay. So these are the kinds of questions that I want to answer in the subsection. So piracy on the internet, I'm sure you've heard of it. It's kind of been difficult to stop. It's still out there, of course, whereas it's a bit easier to stop theft, I might argue. And then we can apply our ethical theories that we just learned about to these issues. Okay, so let's talk about intellectual property because it's a little bit weird. Now, intellectual property is a creative work. So it's something that is intangible. You cannot touch it, but it exists and you can buy it. Okay, it has a price. People, you can buy it. You can buy it or something that uses it. I guess you could say, because now you have copyrights and patents. So examples of intellectual property are things like copyrights, patents, trademarks, trade secrets, things like that. Somebody copyrighted PowerPoint so that nobody can use the PowerPoint name and can like make everything look exactly the same. That's the idea. They patented this user interface, perhaps. And you can't use Microsoft. You can't make a stand outside and call yourselves Microsoft because they've trademarked that name. Okay? Things like that. And yeah, intellectual property is something you can't really touch. So you can think of software as well as intellectual property. Perhaps even music as intellectual property. Yeah. And, well, if it's not a physical thing, then how do you steal it? So, is it the same as stealing? Because when you steal, there's one object, right? There's like, I don't know, a bag of money. If you steal that, you put it over here, well, it has to move. It doesn't exist in both places. Whereas intellectual property, music, software, things like that, you can copy it and the first person still has it, right? That's a problem. That's different. So should stealing and copying intellectual property be treated the same? Okay? That is the main question. So let me tell you, let me give you some history now. This really ages me because this was like when I was a kid, and many of you in this class might not have been born at this time. That's funny. But all right, so there was this program called Napster. That was like the granddaddy of this idea. And so it was a program where people could share what was on their hard drive. Okay. And the things that you probably wanted from them was like videos, music, software, things like that. And so here is somebody with a taste in 60s music, 70s music, and they're downloading files. You can see how slow things were. This was actually pretty fast for the time back then. But they are taking these things, they're copying these files from another person's computer, and Napster was the program that facilitated this. It made the other user's hard drive visible to somebody who wants to search for these things, and allowed them to connect and download. Okay? So this is a bit of a problem. This is an intellectual property issue, and Napster was sued about for this reason. So they were making it a little too easy to share copyrighted content, intellectual property. Okay? So they got shut down because of this lawsuit, and they actually started back up and made themselves like a streaming company, I think, for a little bit. So that was fun. And yeah, this was like the first big deal. Napster allowed you to copy things off of somebody else's computer. And so I'll talk about LimeWire and then we'll analyze these things. Okay? And the idea was it was hard to stop Napster because there wasn't just one server you could shut down. You had to like take everybody's computer off the internet, which of course was impossible. So it's hard to get rid of all this information because it existed on a user's machine. Okay? And then LimeWire. Let's talk about that. That's I was a bit older when this was a thing. Now, it looks pretty much exactly the same as Napster. The idea was you could connect to people, and maybe they actually shared the same file, so you can connect to multiple people at once, downloading from 7 hosts, if you can read that. But again, you are viewing content that should not be given to you. It's copyrighted. You would have to buy it otherwise. And it again got sued and shut down. And one funny little anecdote that I would like to share is there was a a version of LimeWire that was free that you can download and get access to this stuff, and there was a version called LimeWire Pro that allowed you to like connect to more users or something like that. And you could actually use the free version of LimeWire to download LimeWire Pro and steal that. So that was a wonderful example of irony there. But again, this is a program that allows you to connect to other people's computers and download stuff that they have, okay, which you probably would have to buy otherwise. Okay, let's talk about our boys. So, Kant and Mill. What would they think about this? What would Kant do? What would Mill do? So let's talk about Kant. Should you always be able to copy things from other people? That otherwise would cost money. And that is a big question. Kant might think of both. I mean, Kant maybe was like, I don't know, perhaps he was like a communist, for example, and that might be something that he would agree with. Yeah, nothing should have been copyrighted in the first place. Everything should be free. That's totally something that Kant could have said. He could have also said no. That hurts people. Artists, software designers, etc. And so that's the idea. There are two options here, and you could argue either one as long as you back yourself up. All right? Mill would look at it from his perspective, his utilitarian perspective. He would say, okay, what is the best thing here? What gives the most people, what makes the most people happy? What provides the most utility? And these are two separate questions because it's possible that you can provide the most utility by not allowing copyrighted things to be shared. But you could say that, I don't know, and people have made this argument that millions of other people, millions of people who could not afford, for example, like a song, are able to enjoy an artist's music. And one argument that you might see on the internet is something like those same people who stole originally might be converted. They just wanted to try it out, and now they'll actually pay the artist. Or they'll go to concerts, things like that. That's the idea. So that would be a way of using utilitarianism to argue that this is a good idea. Stealing copyrighted content, intellectual property is okay. And then there's also the other option. Would it be a utilitarian viewpoint to say that it is not okay? And that is something that you can argue. You could say that, I don't know, the artist might lose so much money that they cannot make any more music, and then they'll have to find some other job, and then they can't make music anymore. And perhaps their music, their new albums, were touching a lot of people, and they really enjoyed them, and that might make a lot of people sad. So, this is a very good example of showing you that you can use Kantianism and utilitarianism to argue both sides. They will support both sides. Oops. I guess that just isn't a word in the dictionary. Utilitarianism. Okay, it's happy now. Which is interesting, I think. Okay, let's see how we're doing. All right, let's talk about the present day, and then we'll talk about your essay. So now we have this thing called BitTorrent, and I guess it was alive back then, but it's kind of the most popular file sharing way to do things currently. And there's no real centralization here. LimeWire could go down, Napster could go down because you're actually connected to LimeWire's server, Napster's server. Like all the people who had files, they didn't immediately connect to each other. There was like a hub. There's a bunch of little hubs, and every user would connect to those hubs, which would then put them in contact with the right people who had those files. BitTorrent, on the other hand, gives you access straight to the person who has that file. Okay? And yeah, it's hard to bring BitTorrent down because it's just a protocol. It's just a way of transferring information on the internet. And it's also been used for a lot of legal things. For example, this picture that I'm showing you, this is a free operating system called Linux. And this is just making it so that you can download it quite a bit faster because you can connect to multiple people at once. So there are totally arguments for BitTorrent using it legally. And I guess the same was true for LimeWire and Napster, but they made it a little too easy, and it was centralized. So there are websites that you can go to. I will not give them to you, but you can go to and search for BitTorrent files that you can download, and then open it up and start downloading in your BitTorrent program of choice. And those websites that show you where those things are, those can get shut down, but others pop up quite quickly. And so this is an ongoing problem, and this is where we are today. And I think you could use these same arguments, but things get a bit different because now you can talk about the upside of these things. Like you can use it to share free things that you might not have been able to share otherwise. Like not everybody owns a server, but with BitTorrent you can not have to own one, and you can still share what you want to share. Okay, in the last few minutes, I think, let's talk about, just briefly, I think we've hit some other topics quite hard already, but something that you know about quite well, should you download textbooks without paying for them? That's something as a student I think you might consider. So what are some arguments for and against, and what are their assumptions? So let's talk about this. Sorry about that. Well, arguments for and against. I think that the standard argument for downloading a textbook illegally is the publisher sucks. He's charging way too much money. And the assumption there, or one of the ones that you could pick out, is that in this argument, you're assuming that the publisher has control over the price. And they're extorting you. And that might be the case, honestly, sometimes, but other times people give away books for the cost of the book. Like they might make $5 extra. So this is not true. For example, when the book costs, I don't know, $40, because that might be the cost of actually making the book and printing it in color. But $40 still might be too much for you, but this assumption would not apply anymore. I hope you see that. So that's a standard argument for. An argument against is people put a whole lot of effort, the authors of the book should be rewarded for their effort. They allow us to make a class and not have to do as much work. We should be giving them these royalties that they're asking for. And so the assumption there is the authors did a good job. Or one of the assumptions that you could make. And this falls apart, and I think that you might have experienced this with just a horribly written textbook. Maybe it was the fault of the instructor for choosing it, like it was not at the right level for the class, or maybe it was just like shoddily made. It wasn't like there's grammar errors all over the place, but and it just wasn't helpful for you as a student, and that is definitely a possibility. So this is not true, for example, when the book doesn't help you and you didn't like what the authors did. They didn't do enough to warrant the price of the book, for example. And Kant and Mill, if we just want to think about this from their point of view, Kant, this is again an argument for stealing, but maybe you could apply it to textbooks specifically now. Kant would either be for or against. He would say, should we always do this? And so he might say, yes, knowledge should be free. That's how people move up in the world, and we like that. Or no, this hurts the authors and isn't fair. I wouldn't want this to happen to myself, so obviously I don't want it to happen to other people. And then you can do the same kind of arguments with Mill. Is this a good thing? Yes, saves money, or no, hurts the authors again. And again, these kind of arguments are, the same conclusions you can draw, but the arguments for them from these points of view differ. So Mill would say it saves money and that's a good thing because many more people, their utility increases. They can get that book now, whereas they might not have been able to have their lives enhanced by this book. And again, it hurts the authors and it isn't fair because I wouldn't want that to happen to me. We shouldn't always steal. That's what Kant might say. But Mill might say, this hurts the authors and they might never write a textbook again. And that might hurt professors who love that textbook and those authors, and that might trickle down to the students. So there's a lot of different ways to approach these topics, and I just want to give you some examples and try and show my thought process to you as much as possible. That's something that's hard about this semester because I can't have you get into groups and argue with each other, and I would really like to do that. I might find a way later, but that's the idea. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things today. Let's talk about your next writing assignment and then let you go. So it is right here, and it has a fun title. So we're not going to do any computer science topics just yet. This will be the last essay without a computer science topic, but this is a bit longer, 750 words, and I want you to argue this. College is useless and it's not worth going to, which is fun. Go ahead and read the rest of the prompt because you might not agree with that, and that's the point. I want you to argue the opposite perspective. So you can write this essay however you feel like it, but you need to mention Kant and Mill and write about their viewpoints somewhere. So I'll give you a short example of that. And yeah, so I hope this is enjoyable. This is there's no right answer. I'm gonna enjoy reading these to see your arguments and what you're thinking. Okay, the style, this might be a bit different to many of your other classes. I do not care what your style looks like. I am used to writing conference papers, and they just give you the style that they want you to use, and you just do it. So you can do this however you want, and I will be able to read it. You don't have to use any citations in this essay. I might require that in a future essay, but if citing things would help your argument, go for it. And then you can read this if you're interested in a challenge. This is going to be very helpful if you're in math or physics or computer science, like a math heavy major. You'll eventually have to learn this document, this programming language for writing papers. And yeah, turn your essay in as a PDF or just paste it in the text box. But if you do copy and paste, just make sure it looks normal after you do that. So yeah, that is your first larger essay. I guess your second real essay. So good luck with that, and I will see you in the next lecture.